Hello everyone, it's Elaine. I'm back, and I wanted to start off this video by introducing this series and what I intend to do with these videos. So first off, this is the Python programming series, and I will be teaching beginner programming, like for total beginners, using the language, and at the end I will be demoing a few projects as well as demonstrating the other applications of what you can do using this language. So yeah, let's begin. So to begin with, you'll need an IDE or text editor that you can use to run your code. You could just run it in a terminal window or using Notepad, but that's less useful. So what I usually use is Microsoft Studio Code, Visual Studio, or Genie. And I'll link both of them in the description below. But if you don't want to install something, because that can be a bit of a pain, we're using this website called REPL for today. And if you want to save your code, you can make an account. But for now, let's just click Start Coding. Choose Python and create. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is print hello world to the console. So how you do this is by the way of a function called print. And this is a built-in Python function, so you can use it anytime you want. And what it'll do is it will print this, whatever message is in between the parentheses to the console window over here. So we're just going to print hello world and run it. And there, it has appeared. So what we can do with this is we can also create a variable or a container that stores what you want to print. So let's create a container or variable called message. And let's put hello world into it. And hello world will be a string, which is basically a data type that contains words and has to be, and for strings you have to put quotation marks around them before, otherwise the compiler won't understand that it's a string. So now that we have created message, we can instead print message. And when we run it again, it will still print the same thing. So now we can get on to input and output. So let's say that you want to ask for the user's name, and you want it to print a personalized message for the user. So what you can do is use the input function. To use the input function, we will use another Python built-in function called input. So what you want to do is create a new variable, and let's call it, I don't know, username. And what we do is input bracket. And what you put inside the brackets is the prompt that you want the user to respond to. So let's say we're asking them for their name. What is your name? And what we can have it do is print their name back out to them, which is really basic for now, but I just want to demonstrate what the input function does. So you would print username. Say Lynn, and it prints my name back out to me. So how this works is basically the input function takes the input that the user has submitted and stores it into the variable username. And then when the code gets to this line, it looks at the variable username, and when it does, it will see that inside that variable is the user input, and so it will print out the user input. We can upgrade this a bit by having it print out a personalized message for the user. So let's say I want it to say, "Hi, Elaine." Then what I would do is concatenation, which is when you add two strings together with a plus sign, and it's done like this. And you'll make sure to have the space over here, because otherwise it would just print out hi and then the username. And so when we run this, ask me for a name again. And it'll print out, hi, Elaine. Now, variables don't always have to hold strings. They can also hold other types of data, and what we're going to be discussing here right now are ints, floats, and booleans. So ints are basically your normal number. So let's create a new number called num, and let's set it equal to, 3. That's an int. And if we want to create another number, we can't call it num again because num already stores 3. And so if you called it num again, you would just replace what's inside num. So let's call it num1, and let's have num1 store a float, which is basically a decimal number, 4.0. And so what you can do in Python is basic math, and it'll just do it for you on its own. So let's say I wanted to add num and num1 together. So I would print num plus num1, and it should print out 7.0. 7.0. As you noticed, it asked me for my name again, and that's because when you run the program again, it will take in all of this other code as well. So if we don't want that, what we can do is comment out the code. So basically, commenting it makes the computer skip over that code because it knows you don't want it to run it. In Python, you comment out code by adding a hashtag or sharp sign in front of it. And you can see it's grayed out because the computer no longer recognizes it as code. Oops. And you'll also notice, if I run this again, you'll also notice that it prints out 7.0 instead of 7. And this is because you've added an int and a float together, and the floats go into more detail than ints because they are decimals. So Python will return the float whenever you add an int and a float together. So the other mathematical computations you can make with Python are multiplying. So you can multiply num1 and num, and that is denoted by an asterisk. You can subtract. You can divide. And while I'm typing, you can see that there's a lot of stuff that's popping up while I'm typing, and those are just prompts. This is why an IDE is helpful because it tells you stuff about your own code, and depending on which one you're using, it could also help fill it in. And lastly, you can take something to the power of something. So let's say I want to take num1 to the power of num. That would be denoted by a double asterisk. And when we print all of these out, that's when you add it, when you multiply it, when you subtract it, when you divide it, and when you take 4 to the power of 3. Since I don't want these videos to run on for too long, I will talk about the other variable types, such as booleans, later when we get to them, especially in the if statements and for loop section. So lastly, I want to talk about errors. And a compiler will throw an error if it doesn't recognize what code that you were trying to run. So let's say I leave a parentheses out from this line 8. You can see immediately that there is a red squiggly line, an error, underneath the line 9, and that's because that without the parentheses, the computer doesn't know that the print statement has ended. So it thinks that I want it to print this entire thing. And since that there isn't an ending parentheses, it it gets very confused, and so it throws the error. So when I try to run this, you can see that it says syntax error. So syntax error basically means that you didn't use the right language that the computer wanted. As you can see, the error message also very helpfully tells you which line that it thinks that the error is at. As you can see over here, it says it's at line 9, but we all know that the error is at line 8. So error messages aren't always the best way, aren't always the most accurate, and you do have to exercise some critical thinking in fixing your bugs. So that concludes our first lesson, and I will link some practices that you can do in your spare time in the next slide so you can prepare for the more advanced programming things that we will end up doing.